A fully built $6.4 billion bridge. Not a single truck has crossed it yet. And the reason why reveals something about US-Canada trade that most people never see coming. Stay with us, because by the end of this, you'll never look at border politics the same way again. This is not a story about a bridge. It's a story about power, who holds it, who pretends to hold it, and what happens when a quiet phone call destroys a political ultimatum in under 72 hours. The Gordie Howe International Bridge spans the Detroit River, connecting two of the most economically intertwined nations on Earth. It took years to build. It cost billions. And just before its first truck was set to roll across, Washington moved to block it, demanding extra money and partial ownership stakes that were never part of the original deal. For a moment, it looked like the beginning of a serious trade war. Headlines flared, tensions rose. Then, in less than 3 days, the entire confrontation simply vanished. No retaliation, no public blow-up, just silence. If that doesn't make you curious about what actually happened behind closed doors, nothing will. Drop a comment right now. Did you even hear about this story when it broke? Here's what the headlines missed. The agreement behind this bridge was signed back in 2012. Canada covered the full upfront cost. The bridge itself, the highway connections, the inspection facilities. Michigan put in zero construction dollars. Zero. In return, Michigan received joint ownership and half of all future toll revenue once Canada recoups its investment. American steel from Pennsylvania and Indiana was used throughout. Thousands of U.S. workers were hired on site. Washington wasn't being asked to fund a foreign project. It was trying to renegotiate a deal its own state had already signed, accepted, and benefited from. That's not a trade dispute. That's something else entirely. And we'll get to what was really driving it in just a moment. Canada's response came from Prime Minister Mark Carney, and it was surgical. No threats, no press conferences, just a direct call to Washington, walking leaders through the legal text of the 2012 agreement, line by line. Shared ownership, American job creation, the economic damage a delay would cause, specifically to auto plants in Detroit and Toledo that run on just-in-time parts delivery across that very border. Hold up the bridge, Carney explained, and you back up your own factory floors. The demands disappeared within 72 hours. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that political theater never wants you to see. You cannot rewrite a ratified infrastructure contract through public pressure. Documentation beats declaration every single time. If this is your first time hearing the full story, hit like so more people can find it. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because while that standoff was grabbing attention, something much bigger had already been quietly happening in the background, and almost no one was covering it. For decades, the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit was the single busiest truck crossing in North America, the undisputed king of border freight. Entire industries built their logistics around it. Then, without a single headline, it lost its crown. By late 2024, the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia, Ontario had overtaken it in commercial truck volume. By 2025, the numbers told a stark story. Blue Water recorded over 2.1 million commercial crossings. Ambassador dropped to roughly 1.9 million. Into 2026, that gap is still widening. We track these numbers daily, and the trend is not slowing down. So what caused one of the most dominant infrastructure assets in North America to lose its top position almost overnight? Money. Pure, simple, unavoidable math. At the Ambassador Bridge, truck operators pay around $27 per axle. For a standard semi, that's approximately $135 per crossing. At the Blue Water Bridge, the rate drops to roughly $7 per axle, about $35 per trip. That's $100 saved on a single crossing. Now multiply that by hundreds of trucks, running daily routes, week after week. For a mid-size freight company, that difference doesn't just affect the budget. It determines whether the business survives the quarter. Trucking runs on margins so thin that a $100 per crossing gap is not a preference. It's a mandate. Operators didn't abandon Ambassador out of sentiment. They followed the math, and the math was undeniable. This is exactly the problem the Gordie Howe Bridge was engineered to solve, not just for Canada, but for American manufacturing directly. Its planned toll sits around $12 per axle, positioned deliberately between the two existing options. But unlike Blue Water, it bypasses city traffic entirely, connects directly to major interstate systems on both sides, and was purpose-built for heavy commercial freight. Faster crossing times, lower congestion, predictable scheduling. For auto manufacturers in Michigan and Ohio who depend on cross-border components arriving on a precise timetable, this bridge isn't infrastructure. It's an insurance policy against production shutdowns. And here is what ties everything together, the part of this story that never made the front page. The Ambassador Bridge is privately owned by the Moran family, one of the most politically connected infrastructure families in the United States. They have opposed the Gordie Howe Bridge for years. And right before Washington moved to block the new bridge's opening, its owners had reportedly lobbied the administration and made significant political donations. No confirmed misconduct has been established, but the sequence of events, lobby, donate, block, unfolded in a remarkably short window. This was never purely a trade policy disagreement. It was a business protecting a monopoly that was already losing ground, using political access to do what the market no longer could. And it nearly worked. It didn't work, because the legal framework held, because the economic logic was too clear to argue with, because Michigan's own officials pushed back hard, knowing that a delayed bridge meant delayed parts, delayed production, and delayed paychecks for workers in their districts. The system, when it is built on documented agreements and real economic incentives, resists short-term political interference better than most people expect. That's the lesson here. Not that governments are trustworthy, not that corporations play fair, but that written contracts, economic gravity, and the relentless logic of supply chains are more durable than any single administration's demand. The trucks are still moving, the contracts are still standing, and the Gordie Howe Bridge, $6.4 billion in steel and legal commitment, is still waiting to open, not because anyone stopped it permanently, but because the process is working exactly as designed. The question now isn't whether it opens. It's what happens to traffic patterns, toll revenues, and the Ambassador Bridge's dwindling dominance once it does. We'll be tracking every development on this daily as things shift on the ground. If you followed this story this far, you already understand something most viewers walking past this video never will. That the real forces shaping trade between these two countries have almost nothing to do with what gets said at a podium. The math wins. The contracts win. The trucks find the cheapest, fastest route, and they take it, every single time. Share this video with one person who thinks trade wars are decided by tough talk, because this story proves otherwise. And if you want the stories that actually explain what's happening in global trade and economics before the mainstream catches up, subscribe. We don't do noise, we do clarity, and we do it every single day.